Hello everyone, Warner Beck here. Today I will be showing you my PvP guide for Shadow Chaser. Thank you for your comments and likes on my previous Shadow Chaser PvE guide. I really appreciate it and it motivates me to create more content like this. If you haven't watched my PvE guide for Shadow Chaser, I will post a link on the description below. There are two PvP builds you can do for Shadow Chaser. You can go for Lurker build or you can also go for Mask build. For me, I prefer the Lurker build as Meteor Assault does a lot of damage within a 9-meter radius. To put this into perspective, Oblivion only has an 8-meter radius, and even that is already too large. It also does not have a cap of the number of enemies you can hit at once, so if you're strong enough, you can wipe out an entire raid, even an entire guild with this skill. So without further ado, let's get started. We're first going to talk about my stats. So I allocated 99 strength and 99 luck, 67 agility and 40 dexterity. I only added agility to ensure I have 500 attack speed when fully buffed, with concentration potion, food, and potion buffs. I did not put Vit stats since genetics deal more damage the more Vit stat you have, and they really hurt a lot as is. For substats, I focus a lot on my M-Def for more survivability against mage classes. Against physical classes, I allocated more on P damage reduction. Tempting as it may be to build a glass cannon, but sadly if your opponent is well built, then you will not stand a chance. Always remember this, a dead DPS is not a DPS, it's just dead weight. For your special stats, try to get your crit as high as possible due to this meta. A lot of people are building a high crit resistance. Try to get at least 250 crit while in combat. If you can get 300 to 350 crit, that will be more ideal. Moving on to my skills, feel free to pause the video to copy my skills. For your copy skill, still use True Sight as it gives you more crit. Make sure to use soul capturing on all MVPs on the training ground to make sure you have all the MVP skills saved. For MVP skills, I use Power Boost, Meteor Assault, and Chomp. I used to like Spirit Ambush, but people started using Bathory or Argiope, so it does significantly less damage compared to Chomp. For Chomp, you can freely change its element using a converter so it hits harder than Spirit Ambush. These are my manual skills. These are my auto skills. I did not put Power Boost on auto since for some weird reason it needs to be close to a target before it casts an auto, so I just activate it manually. Auto Shadow Spell can also be used in manual, but I prefer to use it in auto. You do not have to manually cast Strip either, nor put it on your auto skills since it will automatically proc. Adding this to your auto or manual skills will just disrupt your skill rotation. The best thing about Shadow Chasers are the different skill combos that you can use. Instead of Meteor Assault, you can also use Large Area Silence. It has a really wide range and very low cooldown. This can be useful if your team needs more utility in different guild events. Feel free to explore the other MVP skills. If you are the main DPS in your team, then I would suggest for you to use Meteor Assault. Next are my equipment. For my headgear, Panda Bao Bao as my headgear since it gives P damage and plus 20% P damage reduction if your HP is above 99%, which is huge. Since we have PvP ward, it will be more difficult for our HP to go below 99%. For my facewear, I use Jade Bouquet since it gives P damage and plus 8% damage reduction upon casting a skill with only 2 seconds downtime. For my mouthwear, I use Carrot Creep since it gives plus 3% P damage reduction, GCD, and damage versus all size. For my costume, I use Naughty Cat since it gives plus 18% P damage if the enemy has a shield. Most, if not everyone, uses floating or surging protection, which makes this easier to proc. If you do not have Naughty Cat, use Panda Splendor since this gives a lot of stats, P damage and P damage reduction. For my backwear, I use Mischief Lantern since it gives P damage reduction, and at plus 15 it gives you up to 36% damage reduction, which is huge. If you do not have Mischief Lantern, you can use any backwear that gives a higher P damage reduction or P damage stat, such as Horn Bunny or Panda Backpack, for free to play. Special tip: if you are not using any mythic gears or mythic set, try to keep your headwear, facewear, mouthwear, costume, and backwear to plus 12. With the previous update, we can actually swap costumes for free, and it automatically transfers your refine. If one of these gears are upgraded to plus 13 or higher, this is when it starts to charge you Zenny every time you change gears. This is why I had to buy a mythic mouthwear, since I mistakenly upgraded it to plus 14. To get your refines to plus 15, simply rent refines through Guild Relic. Another tip for Guild Relic: if your relic is about to expire, you can actually return it and rent it right back, so it is extended for another 7 days. For my cards, feel free to take a screenshot of what I use. I recommend maxing out your headgear status immunity cards, since it gives an extra 4% P damage reduction each. We do not have Dorum yet in LNA, so I'm just focusing on medium and demi-human. Once Dorum comes out, I will most likely also get resistance and damage versus small and brute, but it will also depend on how strong the Dorums are in this meta. For armor card, I use Argiope to counter Shadow Chasers. Meteor Assault element is Shadow, and Argiope gives you 50% damage reduction versus Shadow. I do not recommend using Bathory because it can easily be countered by Aspersio or Holy Crossbow. I use Kobold for more crit. Feel free to use any accessory cards that give you the most crit. Use Osiris Illusion card as well. For my costume card, use Drake Puppet instead of Deviling Puppet, since 2 Drake Puppet at tier 1 gives a total of 18% P damage reduction. 2 Deviling Puppet at tier 1 only gives a total of 240 PvP damage and reduction, which is not much since you have to achieve a certain amount of PvP stat in order for the reduction or bonus to take effect. For my card deck, I use Major Resolve, Minor Protection, and I suggest Major Protection. I do not have Major Protection yet, so I'm using Major Aegis for the extra P damage reduction. Now for my Divine Armaments. For weapon, I use Soul Capturer Crossbow. As you can see, it automatically procs Strip. It also gives so much P damage, that's why Shadow Chasers are so broken. For my armors, I use Goibenset since it gives me more crit res and a lot of damage reduction. For the divine traits, for weapon, try to get PvP damage, ignore P-Def, physical attack, crit, or luck. For the armors, get PvP damage reduction, P damage reduction, and M-Def as priority. Then get crit res, P-Def, M damage reduction as second priority. If you have an option to choose between melee P damage reduction and P damage reduction, go for P damage reduction since it applies to both melee and range reductions. Next, for my Verus Cores, I recommend these from highest priority to lowest. For the novice effects, use Muscle Block, Holy Light Shield, Bloodthirst, Windlord Module, Mana Length, Reversal, and Momentum Management Module. Core Overload can be viable as well. I recently learned that Core Overload damage is added to your P damage bucket, so when you use it in PvE, it doesn't seem like it's working, but that's because you already have a really high P damage, and PvE enemies' P damage reduction is not too high. This is not fully confirmed, but feel free to try. For the expert effects, use Malice, Heart of Rogue, Shadow of Soul, Concealed Teeth, or Backrush. Malice should be your top priority. If you have Shadow of Soul, you can put your Counter Instinct on auto, since it will now have a longer duration. Prioritize Muscle Block, Holy Light Shield, and Malice. Now for my enchants. For headgear and backwear, get PvP Technique with substats P attack, ignore P def. For mouthwear and facewear, get 3 lines of crit resistance. For armor and cloak, use counter crit with substats crit resistance and M def. For shoes, use anti-P damage with substats crit res. For costume, use PvP Technique with substats P attack or M def. For my Nebula path, feel free to pause the video. For my Astral sign, I use Shadow Lurker. Get it up to level 60 as fast as you can since it gives more P damage. Then slowly grind it up to level 80. You can feed it 5 pet EXP book T3 per day. For my Sigils, I use Floating Protection, Immortal Body, Swift Breakout, and Surging Protection. I use both Floating Protection and Surging Protection since it gives both P damage reduction and PvP damage reduction. You can also replace Immortal Body with Brave Heart for more tankiness. For my attack feathers, I use Space, Time, Sky, Light, and Truth. For my defense feathers, I use Light, Dark, Divine, Night, and Order. I will eventually replace my Night feather with Nature once I have fully maxed out all my Divine feathers. For the purple feathers, you can also use 5 Justice feathers instead of Truth, and 5 Soul feathers instead of Order, since getting Truth and Order is very expensive. Still try to get them as much as you can. I did not put light feathers to my attack feathers until I got all my defense LND to level 15. Day feather is very good as well since it gives a lot of ignore P def. You don't need LND feathers on your attack feathers unless you are a very heavy spender. If you're a low spender F2P, aim for higher tier on your feathers. For my mount stats, I use Octopus Drift Bottle for more P damage reduction. You can use any that gives you more damage reduction. For the job mount, make sure to focus on Brave, Clever, Lovely, and Furious. Cute is useless. Use Sunshine Kiwi as well and take the stats it gives if the sum is positive. You can just sell your Wild Kiwi. Alternatively, you can use your Wild Kiwi to max your Brave stat, but once it is maxed, you can start using Sunshine Kiwi to work on the other 3 stats. This gives a lot of P damage reduction and P damage, so do not neglect leveling this up. Lastly, for my Nexus engine. For my Nexus talents, I use Graffiti Mastery as it gives damage reduction, Technique Acquiring for plus 30% damage when using Meteor, Assault, and Chomp, and lastly Soul Capturing for the crowd control. Strip, Fatal Menace, and Invincibility are for mask build, so you don't need them. For the Novice effect, I use Undaunted for more damage and Robust for the M-Def % for more damage reduction against magic classes. For my Nexus modules, I use 55211 on both red and yellow modules and use 22111 on the green modules. For my Type A and B red and yellow modules, I use all PvP stats. For my green Type A and B, max PvP ward on all of them. For the Type E modules for red, I prioritize Ignore P def and PvP damage bonus. Aside from these 2 stats, I would get melee P damage, crit, and crit damage. For the Type E modules for yellow, I prioritize M def and PvP damage reduction. Aside from these 2 stats, I would get P def, crit res, range P-mage reduction, or melee P damage reduction. Special tip: to get your desired talent faster, reset all your talents first, but do not press save or replace. This way, the talent you previewed won't appear in the next talent you reset, and the chance of you getting the talent you want is higher. To summarize this PvP guide, I would suggest to make your Shadow Chaser as tanky as possible, because if you are dead, then you won't be able to take full advantage of your damage. As Shadow Chasers, we stack P damage so much, but we are very easy to kill. I will be creating more guides in the coming weeks on optimizing your character for PvP and what to work on, especially if you're just starting to play. If you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe and share it to your fellow Shadow Chaser friends. Tell me your thoughts on the comments below. Thank you for watching. I'll see you on the next one.